Welcome to this new video of Source Code. In this episode, one story dominates above all others, something that hasn't happened in years, something that deserves a serious discussion, and that, incredibly, seems to be underestimated by everyone. But let's proceed in order. Let's start with a small gem for those who follow alternative operating systems. Haiku OS, the open-source spiritual successor to BOS, can now boot on ARM64, although for now only under QEMU. The bulk of the work was carried out by two contributors who fixed build issues on macOS ARM64, wrote drivers for the Apple S5L UART, corrected the kernel base address, and laid the groundwork for userland. The port is currently considered mostly stable in QEMU, with support for standard Versio devices and up to 8 SMP cores. The stated goal of the lead developer is to one day boot Haiku on an M1 MacBook Air, following the path already blazed by the Asahi Linux team. A niche story certainly, but one that shows how Haiku keeps breathing thanks to a small but tenacious community. These things matter. From Haiku dreaming of Apple Silicon, let's move to something far more everyday, a distribution that still can't make it out the door. Fedora 44 has suffered a second release delay. The previous target was April 21st, declared a no-go, and the new target date is now April 28, 2026. The public blocker tracker lists 4 accepted final blockers and 3 proposed blockers. Among the most serious issues, Anaconda failing to save configuration files, a BTRFS repartitioner crash, and a kernel bug causing a black screen on the ThinkPad X1 Carbon Gen 13 when entering the LUX password. Nothing dramatic, this is normal software engineering. The delay is annoying but preferable to a broken release. We'll wait for the 28th. And staying on the topic of distributions, someone has just published a release that is the opposite of Fedora in almost every sense. No bleeding edge, no compromises, just entirely free software. Trisquel new Linux 12 LTS, codename Ecne, is out. It is a distribution built entirely from free software, endorsed by the Free Software Foundation, based on Ubuntu 24.04 LTS, and powered by the GNU Linux Libre 6.8 kernel. APT 3.0 brings the new Deb822 repository format, covering all installation paths, from the graphical installer to net install. On the kernel front, the team worked to make modifications more modular, significantly reducing breakage in the UDEB components used during installation. Phoronix notes that it is somewhat frustrating to see a desktop-oriented distribution debut in 2026 on such an outdated kernel, especially considering that GNU Linux Libre is already limited in hardware support due to the removal of proprietary firmware. It's a legitimate criticism. Trisquel is an ideological choice before a technical one, and those who choose it know that. I respect the purity of the project, even if it's not my approach. From a distribution that intentionally chooses to stay behind on principle, let's move to news about governments that instead want to move forward, and this time, apparently for real. The French government has officially announced a plan to abandon Windows in favor of Linux on public administration workstations. Implementation will be handled by DINUM, the Interministerial Directorate for Digital Affairs, as part of a broader national digital sovereignty strategy. Every ministry, including public operators, will have to present a migration plan by autumn 2026. The initiative covers not just operating systems, but also collaboration tools, antivirus, AI, databases, virtualization, and network equipment. The first industry meetings to formalize public-private coalitions will begin in June 2026. This is the kind of news that in 10 years we will either cite as a turning point or as yet another announcement that remained just that. The history of Linux migration in public administration is paved with promises and returns to Windows. France, however, has a different political context today, with an explicit motivation tied to the unpredictability of the Trump administration and dependence on non-European technologies. Geopolitical pressure can accomplish what technical reasoning alone has failed to do in 20 years. Right, let's leave France to its plans and move to something that seems much lighter, at least on the surface, because this week Mozilla managed to turn a mascot into a battlefield. Mozilla introduced the new Firefox mascot named Kit. It's neither a fox nor a red panda, but a Firefox. In the official Reddit post, Mozilla used they-them pronouns to refer to Kit, potentially indicating a non-binary gender identity. The discussion exploded around April 11th when Brian Lunduke highlighted the pronoun usage, bringing the topic into a much wider debate. The reaction on X and Reddit was predictable. Screenshots of Firefox being uninstalled, accusations of political agenda, and someone declaring they would switch to Brave because it's the male lion browser. Let me be direct, and I say this with the same honesty I've always had with you. I am against the woke, and I am against the anti-woke. Both are smokescreens. Both distract us from the real problems. The open source world, the free software world, is and must remain a meeting point for people with radically different opinions who agree on one thing alone: digital freedom and free software. When Mozilla decides to assign non-binary pronouns to its mascot, it is not making a technical choice. It is sending an identity signal. And I understand that many people feel excluded by that signal, not because they are bigots, but because they don't want their browser to take sides in the culture wars. That is a legitimate concern. The problem is not Kit. The problem is that the Mozilla Foundation seems increasingly oriented toward representing a very specific worldview, that of Californian offices, not that of the average user who simply wants a free and secure browser. The message I want to give is this: free software must be neutral ground, a place where people meet on the basis of technical principles and freedom, not on the basis of political visions imposed from above, neither from the left nor from the right. Stop feeding this culture of hatred and radicalization. These clashes are exactly what the powerful benefit from, because while we argue about a mascot, Microsoft keeps expanding into schools and public institutions. And speaking of things that truly matter, we arrive at the main story of the week, a story that concerns the beating heart of everything we've talked about so far. Linus Torvalds has released Linux 7. The jump to major number 7 is not due to breaking changes or architectural revolutions, but simply because, as Torvalds himself has always explained, going beyond 19 in the minor number is difficult. You run out of fingers. But behind the joke, there is a rich release. The recommendation, as always, is to refer to the specialist sites, Phoronix, the Register, Linuxiac, but in substance, there are at least 4 relevant points before we get to what I consider the real defining story of this release. The first point we leave for last. Let's start with the rest. XFS becomes self-healing. The file system used by default in all Red Hat-based distributions now autonomously detects and corrects certain types of internal corruption. Nothing miraculous from what one reads, but certainly a significant step forward. KVM gains AMD ERAPS support, new controls for interrupt suppression, and the ability for guests to fully own the PMU, the Performance Monitoring Unit, for better profiling of virtualized workloads. New code for old CPUs like SPARC and Alpha, hardware that many of you have never seen in person, yet still running in some critical corner of the world. The fact that they receive updates and patches in 2026 says something good about the kernel. The new advances, but the old remains. And then there is the first point, the one that almost no one has placed at the center with the proper emphasis, and which for me is the true defining story of this release. With Linux 7, Rust support exits the experimental phase. It does not mean that from tomorrow drivers will be written in Rust continuously, but that the basic infrastructure is considered mature enough to be used in production. Rust is now officially supported on a par with C. Let's pause on this for a moment because it deserves an honest discussion, and you know I have spoken about this topic before. I am not repeating it to be contrarian. I am repeating it because in the meantime the situation has worsened, in the sense that what was an experiment has become an established fact, and the hype surrounding Rust in the kernel has not helped to bring clarity. That said, I am opposed to the introduction of Rust into the Linux kernel, and I have precise reasons. The first is toolchain complexity. Rust brings with it a compiler, a toolchain, and a dependency system that adds to what already exists. Those who maintain embedded systems, those who do cross-compilation, those who work on non-mainstream architectures already know how fragile the kernel build environment is. Adding Rust does not simplify that equation. The second is the pressure on the contributor community. The kernel already struggles to attract and retain maintainers. Rust is a language with a non-trivial learning curve, with concepts like the borrow checker that require a profound shift in mindset. Fragmenting the knowledge base between C and Rust does not help the long-term sustainability of the project. The third, and for me the most important, is a question of design philosophy and licenses. C in the kernel is not generic C. It is a specific dialect, with precise rules, with static analysis tools like sparse, with a consolidated culture of review. Rust brings its guarantees, certainly, but it brings them together with its assumptions, and the Linux kernel cannot afford to make assumptions. To this one must add a question I prefer not to open fully today, but which exists. The Rust compiler is released under the MIT license. Bringing a tool with that dependency chain and that license history into the build process of the most critical software on the planet is something that deserves a far deeper reflection than has been conducted so far. This does not mean Rust is a bad language. It is an excellent language for many contexts. But the kernel is not just any context, and being officially supported on a par with C in the most critical code of the most used operating system in the world is a choice whose consequences we will see only years from now, when the first drivers written entirely in Rust have their specific problems and no one will remember why that choice was made. The story is defining. But defining does not necessarily mean good. Before we close, I have a few housekeeping notes, and as usual, I'll answer some of your questions. Let's start with the first one. Honestly, I prefer Void. MX Linux is a completely different distribution, aimed at a different audience, a much broader one than Void's, I think. And it's a good thing it exists because it's the systemd free alternative for all the user-friendly distros out there. Someone here is asking about Mac and Void, but I have no direct experience with that combination. And sorry, I'm not writing out some of the names because pronouncing them would be impossible. That said, Void Linux should run very well on a MacBook Pro 9 too. That model is old enough to be relatively Linux-friendly. In most cases, you don't need to do any dangerous EFI tinkering. A standard UEFI install with grub is usually enough. The only likely tweaks involve Wi-Fi firmware, suspend, brightness keys, or trackpad behavior. Short answer, yes, perfectly doable. But don't take my word as gospel. Check the Void Linux forum and verify across multiple sources. I want to take the opportunity to respond to Luke regarding his question about systemdfree.com. He's absolutely right. I should include a link in every video. But it's a young project. I'm on my own. I have 1,000 things going on. I will do it. I believe in it. I see it as a medium to long-term effort that I'll build up over time. The site is still a shell. I'm preparing a guide on Devuin and a more detailed comparison of all the systemd free alternatives. It takes work. I've also received emails with offers to help. I apologize. I genuinely need support desperately, but I don't even have the time to reply. It would be great to have a community of users on the forum helping those who ask for it, and it would be great to have detailed guides on init systems and migrations. There are plenty of ways to collaborate. I'm creating some specific ads that I'll include in every video. I won't accept complaints about that. I have never asked you for anything. I don't accept sponsorships, and I think I'm free on my own channel to promote free systems and to contribute, in my small way, to the integrity of my ecosystem. I consider it something useful, very useful. And it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm doing something for the community. I understand that many of you have nothing against systemd, but I'm here precisely to raise awareness. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I've used systemd my whole life. My concerns are unfortunately grounded in how events have unfolded, and if it used to be just a technical matter, a compromise, it no longer is. It's a vital, important, essential issue that concerns our freedom, our privacy, our security, our independence. Don't underestimate this, folks. Your init system matters, and it matters to use alternatives to systemd. If you don't want to, that's fine. I can't force you. But I can keep telling you calmly, without drama, always highlighting the enormous problems of this monolith that is invading your desktop. See you in the next video, and as always, may Linux be with you.